Hi and welcome to the channel. Today we'll be going over the difference between ZimaOS and CasaOS. Now, if you're not familiar with ZimaOS or CasaOS are, they're both NAS operating system. Now, what makes these operating systems stand out is mostly their ease of use and a very extensive app store. Now, here we have the two operating systems. On the left, we've got Zima OS. This is basically a plain setup. Usually at the top there is a banner, but I must have clicked it away. And on the right we have CasaOS, which is basically as stock as it gets. Now, what are the main difference between CasaOS and Zima OS? At the start, there was no real difference between these two, besides Zima OS coming with a few extra applications out of the box. If you're not familiar what Zima OS was originally made for, it's going to be the Zima Cube, for example. You've probably seen the Zima board in the past. There's also a Zima board tool, Zima Blade, etc. So originally this used to be CasaOS and is made by the same company, and they've just basically spun it off into Zima OS with more custom tweaks for their specific hardware. Now, what does Zima OS have that CasaOS does not? And to be honest, the difference is not that large. It comes with a backup utility where you can basically automate to some extent backups from your devices to the Zima OS, but I've not figured an easy way to back up the Zima OS to an external resource with the built-in tools. So the backup is one way. So you have to trust that the Zima device or whatever you're using this operating system on is reliable. The next difference is ZVM, however they pronounce that, Zima Virtual Machines, I guess. Here you can actually run various operating systems. As you see, it does give you the option to just download a few and run it, and I have tried the Windows 11 and it does work. As expected, I've not run any of the Linux versions, but I assume they will just work. The drawback with this Zima virtual machine is very limited. You can set CPU or resources, you can set a RAM allocation, and you kind of can pick BIOS, EFI, and the rest of the stuff is very minimal. So imagine the most basic VM software you can imagine. That's what this is. Now, under the hood, I don't recall what it runs, but it's one of the common host operating systems. Now you also get peer drop, and what peer drop is basically if you run the agent, you can just wirelessly drop stuff on here, which I'm not sure if this is handy on really that must. There is a client as well that Zima comes with, but the client is very minimal as well. Now the settings button will just take you up to the settings, so I'm not sure why they just put this here to take you to the same place. But yep, that's what it is. Now in the settings options, we do have a few various things going on. Okay, you've got the general settings. So if we have a look at CasaOS, it's not really the same. The Zima OS is basically more rounded and a little bit better looking. You've got some of the things hidden under the developer view, which we're going to click now. Now, SSH you enable from here if you want Zima to go to HTTPS and respond from there, you enable this. But if you enable it, you can still go to HTTP and it will work, which is an odd choice. It should force HTTPS. Now SAMBA is obviously enabled by default, and SAMBA 1 you shouldn't really enable unless you need to deal with a legacy device. Now we're talking probably XP 98 most likely. And multi-channel is basically if you had multiple network cards, it will allow to run a little bit faster. Now the Zima AI search, now I have not really used this, but if I understand correctly, it's meant to make your file system a little bit better. Now on the CasaOS side, none of these options are here. SSH, I think, is enabled by default, but the rest is not here. Now, when we go to the storage tab on Zima OS, now CasaOS does not really have anything that intense. CasaOS is very simple, it's linear. What I mean by linear is, now I do not have multiple drives in here, but with Zima OS, you would actually have various RAID functionality. Let's see if this actually gives us anything easy to read. The specs. But Zima OS supports all the common RAID types, RAID 1, RAID 5, RAID 6, etc. Where CasaOS is basically going to just do a RAID 0 kind of setup, very minimal redundancy, if any. So CasaOS is basically ideal if you're already running this on, let's say, hardware RAID already, or again, I'll explain this part later, or if you're running CasaOS in MD RAID, then you don't really need to worry about it because the two disks will be redundant. Now, the networking option here is, again, very minimal. You don't really get much in CasaOS. It's basically non-existent. Now, I have had this on a physical device that had Wi-Fi, and I could not figure out how to make it connect to Wi-Fi. As an example, if you wanted just to plop this behind the TV, it just wouldn't work. Now, one big thing that Zima OS has out of the box, it's got remote access. If I recall correctly, it's utilizing 0-tier in the background, and don't worry about this being exposed because this VM will be nuked when I'm done with it. Now, what that technically allows you to do is access Zima OS and its content remotely, regardless where you are, as long as you have the agent installed via 0-tier. This agent uses 0-tier in the background. Again, I might be wrong, or they might change this down the track, but as of 14th September 2025, this is what was happening in the background. And the interface for this agent, I don't have it installed, is very minimal. I'm sure you can find some screenshots online. Now, another great thing is because you've got a fair amount of flexibility with storage, you can also move stuff around as you see fit here. Now, you can, for example, say, hey, the app images, I want to move them somewhere else. Now, I don't get these options because I didn't attach any extra storage to here. But if you did, you would have the options to just move these as you see fit. So you could have all your important stuff on redundant storage. Now, talking about redundant storage, the big difference, or the major difference, if you ask me, and something that I'm hoping Zima will at some point figure out and get their act together, is the host operating system, in this case Zima OS, cannot be installed redundantly. So if your host operating system dies, you're out of luck. Now, the second drawback is both of these do not have a way to back up the configuration. Now, I'm not expecting it to have an option to back up all the data, which would be great, but that's not there either without any third-party apps. There is no way, and I didn't bother spending too much time, but there is no easy way or built-in way to back up the operating system configuration, so you can kind of roll it, reinstall it, click roll back from backup, and just get everything up and running with your users, etc. if you had multiple users on here. Okay, so there is no redundant storage for Zima OS. Now for CasaOS, because CasaOS, and we'll go through that in a minute, installs on top of Linux, like Ubuntu or Debian, you can set up the initial install with MD RAID, and you will end up with a redundant drive. And I have actually tested this, and it does work. I have broken it since, and it's somewhat in an iffy state, but that's because I was experimenting with things. It does still boot, it is still redundant. I just have to select the boot disk at startup in my case. And again, that's possibly a me thing because I've set something up wrong. But at least for CasaOS, you can set it up with MB RAID, which is the Linux RAID. Or obviously, for both of these, if you have hardware RAID already, and it's running on hardware RAID, then you would have redundancy. But out of the box, when you just install technically both of these, there is no prompt that says, hey, do you want to add a disk and make your boot operating system redundant? Now, if you ask me, operating system being redundant or an easy config backup is essential if this is to be used in anything serious. Now, if we go over to the install on how you actually install these. Now, as I hinted at just before, you install Ubuntu, Debian, and a large number of operating systems, and you just run this command, and it will basically install everything for you. Now, I'm going to link this below, which kind of outlines some of the differences. But yeah, CasaOS is very good to that extent because it runs with normal Linux under the hood. Now, should you care that CasaOS runs Linux under the hood, that you can adjust and tweak any way you want? Because when we go back to Zima OS, up until recently, they were running Ubuntu, if I recall, under the hood, but they've switched it over to a completely independent operating system. Now, how does this move affect you? Now, I'll give you an example here. In my case, if you are running, for example, Plex, and you run it in Docker, once in a while, you're going to have the codecs freak out, and you have to delete a folder in relation to EAC3 playback. That's an audio codec. Now, if you run Plex on the hardware itself directly, you will not have this problem. Now, in Zima OS and CasaOS, I've tested it. The problem with the EAC still persists, and now this is not EAC3. Now, this is not a Zima Casa problem. This is a Docker problem. So besides my example is on CasaOS, you're able to run various things directly on the operating system. Now, for example, what I would recommend being run directly in the operating system is something like Cloudflare tunnels. That way, you do not have to rely on Docker being healthy, etc., for you to get remote access to your instance. And it will give you way more flexibility in how you deploy these. Now, if we go back to Zima OS, how do you install Zima OS? Okay, let's go away from the RAID and from this. Now, the way you install Zima OS, you're going to download the package, which is this, and you're going to burn it with like Balena Etcher, for example, and it will actually write the full installer to USB. Now, the annoying thing is this comes as an IMG. If you try to convert this into an ISO, etc., it does not play nice. It refuses to boot, or it boots and crashes partway through, or it has all kinds of errors. So you literally have to burn this directly onto a USB. So you cannot also run this in stuff like Ventoy to make your life easier. Every time you want to do this, you have to make a new. Now, since this the way deploying these images is very annoying, it's probably, I'm going to suspect, a more solid way to get this done, and it installs very quickly. The annoying thing is if you're trying to run this as I am here in a virtual environment, it's not easy to boot or figure out how to boot that image and make it work and just install it next. Now, since it's very difficult, what I've done and I figured out is the easiest way for me to do is actually just install Zima OS on physical hardware, and then I just converted that physical hard disk to a VHD and then called it a day. And then I've just copied it into Zen Orchestra in this case, and it just works. I do wish they would release an ISO, something where we can run this in a virtual environment. Not that that is recommended in any. Now, since we are talking about virtual environment, what I have done for testing, just to see how it behaves, I've made two virtual hard disks and I attached it to Zima. And after a few reboots, again, I did not pass through physical hardware. I have attached virtual hardware, which again, you should in no case do, but I did it for the sake of testing. It corrupted in about 2 days. And that's obviously not great. Now, as mentioned, you should not be doing this. You should not be giving virtual hardware because they just don't know how to deal with it. So that's all my fault, which is why this VM also has more storage. I gave it more while I was testing. Now that we've gone through the base difference, the install process, and how they differ, if we go to any of these, the steps for updating the operating system are different. As in both cases, they do not make it straightforward. Now here you do have an update button and you click update. Apparently it's the latest version, and I have seen an update on my original deployment before. Now on Zima OS, technically what it's meant to do is up here. There's actually a, if we go back to, there's a 1441 and a 144 since I made this VM. I've left this not updated so you can see that this is actually not checking for updates. As of 144, which I have deployed on a different test rig, the update option actually came up and I was able to click and update the operating system. I've been testing Zima OS and CasaOS probably for about 6 months now. So I have them at various stages in the versions. 1.3, whatever it was, 1.3.2 onwards. The annoying thing is the documentation for updating, for example. Let's see if we can find it. Is not correct. Now, I follow the steps in order to update this, where you dump it in a particular folder, and it's meant to just work, but it's not. I've dumped it into various folders. I've SSH'd in and uploaded it, and I cannot get these to just update. So I don't know what the story is with that. As I mentioned, as of 1.0.4.4, it seems to actually update correctly. Now, for CasaOS, you update it like any other Linux application. You can obviously SSH in or hit this button, and I'm not entirely sure if that will get it updated. As I said, I've seen an update in the past and I've clicked it and it seems to have worked. But that's to be decided, I guess. So ZimaOS has a few extra applications that they've baked in, and they've made it that the storage section is kind of only available in Zima OS, which is their own operating system for the hardware that I've closed just before. Where on CasaOS, they've removed those options. Now, in regard to updating applications, with Zima OS, you're going to have here, there's going to be an update button, and you just click update and it updates. In CasaOS, it does not seem to do that. So what I'm actually doing to update it, I've just got Portainer installed, and I just get Portainer to force update it by rebuilding the image. Now, in regard to the stores, as you see, these are basically identical. Now, they seem to somewhat behave differently. For example, if I add so if I add mine in here now, which is basically a fork of CP 0204. So big thanks for them for, well, not being grumpy about me forking it. Now I'm tweaking it to my liking and to how I want to do it. So most of them are still original, with just some things changed. And I'm adding more things in there all the time. Now that should have processed. Now, as you see, there is a number difference here. So they were basically identical. Now they're different. Now, sometimes you will see that then when you add a repo, it does not show up straight away. So, for example, if we do they're both the same, so there is nothing you really need to do. So sometimes you're going to see when you're adding application, this count is wrong. It could be off by hundreds, and over time, they come in. And I don't know why they don't show up straight away or what's taking so long. And you might see that the count is completely off. So Big Bear Tech, Big Bear Tech, and Store, they're the same. Sometimes I've had situations where you needed to just remove the base store and then just go back and re-edit, which is this one here. And then all the apps show up. Now, is there a difference in deploying the apps? To be honest, no. If we pick, so by default, you will want to say install custom. Rarely will you want to just install what's there. You usually want to change this to latest. If there is some user password that you need to set for that particular application, you do that. Sometimes it does not like the app field. Both of them do not like the app field, so usually I would rename it to this. It does not like the symbol app thing. But in overall, they install identically. So let's just watch this install for a second. Both of these have been given the same amount of resources. They're both on separate tiny or whatever HP calls them a micro. As you see, they're both installed. The apps just work generally. Well, I probably should have picked that app. I know that just works. Most apps just work. There's probably something that I did not set somewhere. For some of the apps, you do need to read the documentation to see what they expect you to do. Now, the way you get to the logs, you basically go to settings, logs, and then it might tell us here what's happening. Well, it is possible that this app just doesn't have an interface and it's used in some different way. I'm just going to exit it. Okay, so there's the app. Now, the App Store is basically identical. So what you can do in one, you can do in the other. There's no difference there. Now, when we go to the File Explorer, you're going to see differences. Okay. Now, on the left, we got Zima OS. On the right, you've got CasaOS. If we actually pick, as you see on Zima OS, you have a great deal more options. Where on CasaOS, you're very limited. You just have the basic cut, copy, paste. Now in Zima OS, you do have the get info thing, which will tell you how big that folder is. You have the option to migrate. For example, if you were moving it to, if you had a different partition or a different something to move it to. Now Zima OS also makes it easier to some extent. I mean, they're basically the same. But it makes it easier for you if you're moving a large amount of data from A to B, because it will actually have, let me see if I can go in here and copy. This is just me testing things. So if I go copy, I can go to, oh, okay. That's just tiny, but usually you would have a bar that says I'm copying X, Y, Z. Let's grab something that's larger. Copy. Okay. Now this is going to be showing up there. Now, from what I've observed, it's not recommended to close this window. So ZimaOS has way more functionality to move data around. I'm going to hit cancel on this. You have an import, so you can import it from a particular, and you basically just browse to it and it will go copy, paste, or override, or skip, merge. Where on CasaOS, it's very limited. As you see, that's it. That's all you can see. Now on ZimaOS, obviously you do have access to the root because you are running this on, and to some extent you can browse to it under certain conditions on ZimaOS, but most of it is going to be read-only. Now, from these two operating systems, which one would I use? Definitely Zima OS. It has more functionality. If you are planning to just run this in as a VM, it probably doesn't make a big difference. Sorry, my voice was getting a little bit crackly there. If you're planning to run this as a VM, it probably doesn't make a big difference. But in regard to usage, etc., performance-wise, they're identical. ZimaOS has more RAID capabilities. If you intend to run VMs, you can run VMs. You can actually keep the ISOs local and just point it to an ISO. One drawback is you cannot have a boot ISO and let's say a driver ISO. It only allows you to run one ISO. You cannot change the ISO source while the machine is on, so you need to turn it off, change the source. So as I said, that Zima VM is very limited. If that's what you intend to use it for, only for something that you don't really care about if it eventually fails, and you have no easy way to back this up. Now, when you do place the VMs, it does ask you where you want to put them, so you can select a folder, which is good to some extent, but you would have to manually back them up. Now, we're just going to go a little bit to the website here. So CasaOS, SSS pros. All right, again, I'm not going to read through this. Both of them work identically. CasaOS, you have access to the root operating system under the hood. It can run on pretty much anything that you got floating around. Now, this says not complete or it relies on underlying distro. Yes, true. It can somehow complicate troubleshooting because you're not sure if it's something in the Linux you did under the hood or not. But as a benefit is you could have a full-fledged Linux with GUI, graphical user interface, and using it that's in the background running all the CasaOS stuff. So some say this as a con, I see it as a pro. You know, there is no automated way in ZimaOS either. Now, as in for Zima OS, it's a full operating system, supports all the general array types. Yeah, it supports Btrfs, etc. Okay, yeah, it does support snapshotting as well. I've not utilized it, but it does support snapshotting. Now, both of them will generally run the NVIDIA stuff without any problems. I have run the RTX 40 60 and 1050 Ti. Both of them will work no problems. I don't think I've had to install anything extra. They just worked out of the box. So I'm not sure if it's something that it just makes work when you install. Now again, the apps, they're both identical. The store is identical. So for you, it's ideal just to read through this, see if you like one or the other more. In most cases, I would just go with the Zima OS, which is basically CasaOS with more functionality. Now, if you're running this on physical hardware, that is, if you're running it as a VM, you're not going to be running VMs as a VM inside the VM. That's ridiculous. So you may as well just run CasaOS and call it a day. Now the ZimaOS interface is more capable. The file manager for me is probably a big thing. It's very good to just make it easy for you to move things around. I'm going to leave this below. And again, let's go back to what operating system is for who, and just briefly over the main difference. So let's go with Zima OS, standalone operating system. Everything's there. Comes as an IMG, which you need to burn to a USB stick or a VHD. I've seen people burn it onto a VHD and use that as a boot media. Zima OS comes with a VM manager, comes with a backup, so the agent on your computer can actually back up to Zima if that's what you want to do. Again, Zima OS, I would probably recommend more if you're running this on physical hardware. Like, for example, the Jonesboro N5 case that I've got. Now, Zima OS in overall is going to be the better choice, hands down. When should you be using CasaOS? Again, probably if you just care about the apps in there, using them, working it. If you're going to run it as a VM, CasaOS is probably going to be easier. What I've done is I've made templates, and where are my templates? Did I? Yeah. So I've just made a template. So whenever I want to spin up an instance, it's there ready to go. Depending on what you're using, not always the case. So, I mean, honestly, originally I thought CasaOS is going to be hands down the better operating system. And the only thing that's getting me over there is one, the storage manager is better. The apps location you can easily move, which you cannot do in CasaOS. You kind of have everything in the core VM, and that's it. If you do have a second and you chose not to merge them, you can nominate it during install. But in overall, I'm going to say ZimaOS wins pretty much all the fields that you can think of, just because it's a more complete operating system, as it says here. You know, it's just basically full operating system out of the box. It's going to get better. They do have updates every other week. They're coming up with an update or incremental update. And the interface has slightly changed from then to now. Now, this is what the latest version looks like if we put them side by side. So this remote access banner and the file banner at the top is what usually comes with. But if we click them away, they're basically the same. The menus, as you see, this is updated, and there is the update. So you can just say, hey, I want to update that, and click it. There is no auto update. I couldn't see an auto update option anyway. Maybe it's still coming. But as you see, it's just updating there. This is basically my test. And I'm trying to figure out sync thing to see if I can easily back up some of the components from here, because for some reason the backup is only one way. It's ridiculous. But yeah, this is the latest update. As you see, general is basically the same. Storage, pretty much the same. Network, etc. So nothing really big going on there. Now, I think I mumbled on enough. I'm gonna call it a day here. As you see, CasaOS versus ZimaOS. In my opinion, again, keyword being my opinion, ZimaOS wins. If you add all the stores and all the apps in there, they're identical. So there's not really a big difference. There again, some are missing, and I don't know why. At some point, they eventually show up. And I don't know if there's just a conflict of sorts. But yeah, now I've seen this happen generally on underpowered hardware where sometimes it will just not bring up any, and you just need to remove and re-edit again. And that includes the default store that comes with it. So I've had to remove the default store and add it on some clean installs. But as you see, beyond that, they're identical. So I wouldn't really stress about the store too much. It's going to be the file manager, Zima VM, the backup utility, and the peer drop. Again, you can just get similar apps from in the store. In both cases, you can just import, for example, okay. So they're just N8N for you to mess around with, but you can just import. Once you're done, you can actually export the whole thing and it will reconfigure all of these. So that is also going to be the easiest way for you to move from CasaOS to Zima, or other way around, or from one Zima to, so you would basically have an export button. You would export this, copy the data from the app folder from A to B, and then you would just go to the store and install it by importing that config. It's very simple. I've done it a few times successfully without any problems, so it works really well. So I wouldn't really worry about it too much. But again, I wish this so-called backup utility, if I say LAN, so you can select source from outside to the Zima, but you cannot select it to go from Zima to outside. Why? I don't know. It's stupid. But again, that's my opinion. All right, I'm probably going to end this for the 5th or 6th time, but I'm going to leave you at this. You guys have a great day, and this link will be below if you want to just skip through it quickly. And I will attach the main Zima websites as well. So have a great day and see you around. Bye.